Section 5, Part 4, Integrating with API Gateway. You can integrate your HTTP API with AWS services by using first-class integrations. A first-class integration connects an HTTP API route to an AWS service API. When a client invokes a route that's backed by a first-class integration, API Gateway invokes an AWS service API for you. For example, you can use first-class integrations to send a message to an Amazon Simple Queue service or Amazon SQS queue, or to start a step function state machine. First-class integrations have required and optional parameters. You must configure all required parameters to create an integration. You can use static values or map parameters that are dynamically evaluated at runtime. To create a first-class integration, choose a supported AWS service action, such as SQS send message. Configure the request parameters, and provide a role that grants API Gateway permissions to invoke the integrated AWS Services API. Depending on the integration subtype, different request parameters are required. This slide displays an AWS CLI command to create an integration that sends an Amazon SQS message. The queue URL and message value in the request body are forwarded to Amazon SQS to process. When you use the console to work with an AWS service, it cannot know which mappings your application is using. Therefore, you must set up the request parameters. An HTTP proxy integration enables you to connect an API route to a publicly routable HTTP endpoint. With this integration type, API Gateway passes the entire request and response between the front end and the back end. This method is useful when migrating from a monolithic application to web services. You can map your entire monolith with API Gateway routes and forward them to your monolith's endpoints. Then, one by one, you can remap specific routes to point to your new Lambda function services as you break off pieces of the monolith. In the slide example, in step 1, you start with 2 API routes that connect to a monolithic application on Amazon EC2. In step 2, you point the /services route API gateway and use an HTTP proxy integration to point it back to your monolith endpoint on Amazon EC2. Finally, when your updated version of the /services service is written in a Lambda function, you point the API integration to the Lambda function instead. With a private integration, you can expose your HTTP or HTTPS resources within an Amazon VPC for clients outside of the VPC to access. You can control access to your API by using any of the authorization methods that API Gateway supports. To create a private integration, you must first create a network load balancer. It must have a listener that routes requests to resources in your VPC. Then, create a VPC link to connect your API and your network load balancer. After creating the VPC link, create private integrations to route traffic from your API to resources in your VPC through your VPC link and network load balancer. This slide provides an example of how to create a private integration. It assumes that you've created your VPC link, then use the create integration method to connect API Gateway to VPC resources by using the VPC link. Now, we'll look at how to modify API requests from clients before they reach your backend integrations. As illustrated in the Lambda non-proxy integration example, you can modify API requests from clients before they reach your backend integrations. You can also change the response from integrations before API Gateway returns the response to the clients. You can use parameter mapping to modify API requests and responses for HTTP APIs. To use parameter mapping, you specify API requests or response parameters to modify, and then specify how to modify those parameters. Note that you cannot configure requests or response mappings for reserved headers. This slide shows an example of how to request transformation. You can append, overwrite, or remove any header value that you choose. You can also do these tasks for query string values, and you can override entire paths. Request parameters are a key value map. The key identifies the location of the request parameter to change and how to change it. The value specifies the new data for the parameter. The example adds a header named header1 to an API request before it reaches your backend integration. And API Gateway populates the header with the request ID. Here are the key takeaways for this section of the module. API Gateway simplifies the work to integrate with AWS services from your client applications. Use Lambda proxy and HTTP proxy integrations for simple pass-throughs to backend services. And use transformation options to modify requests and responses between clients and targets. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.